Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is the Vulgar Marxist. If you had been wondering over my silence as to the current election cycle, it is because 1. December is one of the worst months for truck driving humanly imaginable, and 2. I wanted to take a historical look at what was happening. I was waiting for it to end, for Inauguration Day to happen, before examining the scale and scope of the debacle we have just suffered. It is January the 21st. Inauguration Day has happened, and we are now going to discuss why this unmitigated and utter defeat is entirely and completely the fault of the Democratic Party. Now, I am sure a number of you right now are quite unhappy with that proclamation. They tried so hard. They fought so valiantly. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Look back to the start of the Obama presidency, and the Democratic Party has made mulfup after mulfup, error after error, done everything conceivably possible to throw away the staggering electoral majorities they started with. And this isn't hard to figure out. This is relatively simple. At the end of 2008, the Democratic Party had 70 million voters supporting it. By 2012, this was down to 65 million supporters. Trump didn't get any more voters than John McCain did. It is simply that the Democratic Party lost so many supporters. In the ensuing 8 years, it allowed the Republicans to take the White House, both houses of Congress, and most of the state houses in the United States in the interim. So what happened? What occurred? We know that the programs we are advocating have overwhelming public support. The majority of the public, by close to 2/3, supports education, public schools, healthcare, infrastructure. This isn't even open for debate. The numbers prove this again and again. Where did we lose 15 million voters? For this, we need look no farther than the demographics of the 2008 election. The majority of the voters that came out to support Obama were first-time voters, 18 to 25-year-olds who'd never voted before, weren't particularly interested in politics up until that point, and suddenly found a candidate who spoke to their interests. Now, anyone with a passing understanding of electoral math is going to tell you that when you have a demographic of voters suddenly join the electorate, they will leave the electorate just as quickly. You need to steward this demographic very carefully and take strong counsel to any suggestions or ideas they might have, or any aspirations or wishes they might express. The Democrats failed in this staggeringly. Now, I would like us to throw our minds back to 2008. Wall Street had just collapsed. Huge numbers of people were unemployed. There was really deep concern that the American economy was going to fail, and fail spectacularly. I was still not in college, but hanging around college, helping people with various projects, some politically related, some not. And I remember very clearly the concerns being expressed by the groups of people who had suddenly discovered that they had a vote and it could actually change things. Student loans, getting a job, finishing college, paying rent, buying food, all of which solid working class liberal concerns. Where is my paycheck coming from? How am I going to deal with these bills? Is there a program that can assist me to deal with this? None of these were the wretched, poverty-stricken, welfare, whatever masses the conservatives like to claim they were. These were people who wanted a hand up, not a handout. They didn't want their student loans paid off for them. They wanted a break in the interest rate. They didn't want to sit on the couch and do nothing. They wanted a job that paid a living wage that would help them put bread on their table and a roof over their head. They wanted the same deal their grandparents got to have. And when the time came for the Democratic Party to do something about this, to address the concerns this base of voters that had turned out in droves to help them achieve the White House and both houses of Congress, the Democratic Party stumbled and fumbled and bumbled around and addressed exactly none of their concerns. Now we are going to make a quick jump to 2010. This is going to be slightly out of order because everything happened in a giant flusterclock. But I would like to pause a moment to illustrate exactly how badly this screw-up occurred. So wherein lies the error? What went wrong? The answer is actually quite simple. While the Patient Affordable Care Act, or ACA, or Obamacare was a staggering legislative achievement, it did not deal with any of the interests or concerns of the Democratic Party's primary voting base. It did not help them pay for their housing or pay off their student loans or put food on their table. It was, in many regards, a colossal handout to the insurance industry that, while getting insurance for people desperately in need of it, did not do anything for the young voters who had turned out to support Obama. This is actually repeatedly illustrated in dozens, if not hundreds, of articles about the Young Invincibles, which is truly and frighteningly staggering when you think about it. I mean, how obtuse can you be? Throughout the entirety of the debate on the Affordable Care Act, no concern was shown for the youth voters who had lifted and carried and struggled and pushed to get Obama and Congress into office. No mention of Young Invincibles was made during the passage of the ACA. It wasn't until years after the law had been passed that, oh my gosh, young people might not support this. Young people might not participate. This should have been the very first and foremost of concerns. How will those who have gotten us into office, won us these positions of authority, react to the legislation we are passing? Yet it's not even thought of, considered, or mentioned in any way. The Democratic Party blindly and happily assumed the support of the millennials, and having totally failed to do anything to earn or maintain that support, reacted with shock and horror when that support was no longer forthcoming. In the fall of 2011, a group of people occupied downtown New York, demanding an immediate course correction by the Democratic Party, declaring that their concerns over wealth inequality and the vagaries of Wall Street trading were not being adequately addressed. They spent nearly 4 months sitting in a park demanding the Democratic Party, then still in control of both houses of Congress and the White House, immediately take Wall Street firmly in hand, pass legislation ensuring a basic standard of living to all Americans, and end the practices of the business community that were destroying the U.S. economy. Now let's stop and think here. In 2 years, we have gone from broad youth support to active protesters trying to bottleneck and grind to a halt the U.S. economy, demanding reform. And the response of the Democratic Party was to ignore this completely. These are your block captains. These are your get out the vote advocates. These are the people who drive the buses for Souls to the Polls. And you have just thumbed your nose at them. You have just told them you expect them to continue doing all of the lifting and carrying for your political party while you address exactly none of the concerns that they have, none of the goals they want to see achieved, none of the aspirations or desires they hold, no vision they wish to accomplish. And you expect them to continue doing the lifting and carrying for you. What a fascinating life you must have led. How truly and astonishingly amazing your worldview must be. For 4 years, we were deluged with a plethora of admonishment about how incredibly ready for Hillary we all were. Pundits, newscasters, every major channel explaining over and over how the first female president would be transformational and revolutionary. I spent most of this time wondering if perhaps I was the only person in America who remembered the 2008 election and the fact that Hillary Clinton had the charisma, self-awareness, and sensitivity of a hurled brick. This woman was a walking gaffe. Nearly any female candidate would have been more qualified than Hillary Clinton. It did not matter what credentials she had. She was utterly and completely disinterested in the concerns being expressed by her base. She could not have cared less about Wall Street. She was openly in bed with them. She pumped free trade and neoliberal economics like they were the blessing of God. She flip-flopped on social issues so many times it wasn't even funny. She was interested solely in Hillary Clinton, not in the base of support needed to win elections, which might not have been a problem if the entire Democratic establishment had not committed exactly the same error. Having been told in article after article, poll after poll, over and over and over again, that the candidate they needed was Bernie Sanders. The candidate who could stop Trump was not Hillary, it was Bernie. The Democratic establishment did not merely ignore utterly and completely the information presented to them. It actively and consciously worked to undermine the best qualified candidate at every turn and point in order to favor an old guard party hack. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we lost the election. It has nothing to do with racism. It has nothing to do with a resurgence of interest in Republican talking points. It has nothing to do with a rise of the alt-right. The alt-right is just as unpopular as they ever were. The Democrats threw this election away. They threw it away to protect neoliberal talking points, long discredited, to attack socialists who are currently more popular than they are, to protect a party old guard so massively out of touch it's not even funny, to continue the politics as usual they are now famous for. Very hard questions now need to be asked. We have just lost an election to one of the most myopic, self-serving, and incompetent people ever to be elected to the office of president. We have lost the House, the Senate, and most of the state legislatures, entirely because of the incestuous backdoor dealing of the Democratic Party. This was, in political parlance, an unforced error. At any turn and point, the Democratic Party could have chosen to do something different. They were repeatedly told to do something different, not merely by their base of support, but by impartial pundits nationwide. And they chose to ignore all of it. The first question we must answer is there anything in the Democratic Party currently worth salvaging? And I think that is going to be a very long and intensive debate that I'm not certain we have the time to have.